Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.
Greetings, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. We're just a little bit behind. Zoom through an update at a bunch of us today, so we had to make sure that everybody was working properly so we could see everybody's smiling face as we do another bunker edition of the week that was. I am Craig Fahle, your host. Guests this week include, of course, Nancy Derringer from Deadline Detroit. Hello, Nancy. From an undisclosed location, as you are still without power.
Yes, still without power.
The storms coming through on the east side were nothing to sneeze at this week.
They were really bad.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce the rest of the lineup. We can talk about
I will. Alan Lengel is here. He, of course, is the editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Glad to have you with me. Greg Bowens is joining us once again. He's making his third appearance in about the last 6 weeks. We appreciate it very much. Welcome back, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, the return of my good friend Saeed Kahn. For a long time, Saeed, of course, is a Wayne State University lecturer, has not been able to be on the program because he had staff meetings on Fridays, which really screwed things up for me because I come to rely on Saeed's expertise for this program, but he is now able to join us here from his bunker location. Saeed, welcome back. Appreciate it very much.
Great to be back. Thanks, Craig.
And I just want to let folks know, coming up a little bit later on this hour, we will be coming up with our Schmuck of the Week nominees. So I am looking to see who is going to face the wrath of Saeed Kahn. Sorry. Had to do it. Kahn. Anyway, okay,
I heard that ever. First time.
I know you haven't. We can compare dumb last name stories one of these days, Saeed, because I've got the same one every Christmas. Fa la 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 lee. Yes, that's never happened before. So, all right. So this week, again, I don't even know where to begin because I was going through my notes that I take over the last few days, and I have a bookmark section on my browser here it's called This Week. So all the stories that I think are worthy of talking about this week. Well, the list was so long. I've been cutting things out all morning. And I guess I want to start with something that President Trump said. Shock of shocks, I know, because basically we're starting to see a pretty significant rift developed between his military advisors and the president himself. Now, President Trump, in talking about, of course, tear gassing protesters the other day, tweeted this out yesterday. And there's so many things wrong with this. It says, our great National Guard troops who took care of the area around the White House could hardly believe how easy it was. A walk in the park, one said. The protesters, agitators, anarchists, Antifa, and others were handled very easily by the Guard, DC Police, and SS. Great job. Now, SS, of course, referring to the United States Secret Service. They usually go by USSS instead of the SS. But I'm looking at this tweet and I'm thinking, this guy's looking at this as if it was some sort of military operation, not exactly Sherman's March to the Sea, but I'm serious. What, a walk in the park? It literally was a walk in the park for the protesters. Lafayette Square Park, right outside the White House. This is not something that is sitting well with people, and it seems to be costing him dearly. Who wants to take this one up first? Alan, go ahead.
I'll be real quick and say he's been criticized for, not really being a wartime president. Like, we're in a war with COVID, and he's been criticized so much for it. So now he's showing that leadership that he can be the commander in chief here. So,
the commander.
If I were not so cynical,
Grenada was more difficult than this.
If I were not so cynical, I would be in despair right now. But, I always try to keep a certain sardonic, askance look at the world. But that, you talked about a rift. Did you say a rift between the generals?
Yes.
I mean, the event, to have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff essentially apologize for his own actions at the side of an American president, not 2 weeks after he took them, in an address to his, it was a service academy, right?
Mm-hmm. National Defense University.
Yeah. Exactly. that just blows my mind. It blows it right out of the back of my skull. I mean, I just don't understand how we can be living this timeline right now. I don't know.
Well,
You know, as
go ahead, Greg.
as a veteran, I got to say that the whole thing is disgusting, and certainly, you know, I just want to let the head know that your apology is not accepted. Resign. You know, it is a serious lapse in judgment as a uniformed military officer, a senior uniformed military officer, to not be able to distinguish between his duties as an appointee and his duties to the Constitution and the American people. And I think that the damage that he did was bad. It's interesting that he would give that apology to a group of, you know, what will be future senior officers. And you got to wonder whether or not his apology really rings hollow. I mean, this is some serious stuff here. And
It
the
is.
idea that you would use American troops against your own people for peacefully protesting, you know, it's just beyond the pale. And Trump's talking about he wants to be a wartime president. That's something that should give us all pause, because in a war you have an acceptable level of casualties, and our fight against COVID is a fight for life, to sustain life. It's not a fight against an enemy where we would allow casualties to occur. And I think that's probably why he is so quick to have us open up quickly, and is saying maybe we will have some little fires from COVID, because he has an acceptable level of death for the American public. And to me, that's completely unacceptable.
It's unusual to me. Well, and again, everything about this guy is unusual. But you know, here's a guy. The Republican committee in the Senate voted to change the names of these military bases away from these Civil War people, and the president says we're not having it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, he wants to be a wartime president. Well, he certainly is the culture war president. Saeed, I mean, he is finding ways to divide us all over the place. He's bitching about NASCAR, you know, saying that they don't want the Confederate flag there. He's saying that he's doubling down on keeping these bases named after Confederate generals. I'm just flabbergasted that he is willing to take this stand, especially after all the criticism that's been leveled at him for being a racist.
Well, coming to America, there's a plug for a movie. If anyone needs the title, I don't know if it's been taken. I was 8 years old, and it always struck me, because I was always a history nerd, even living in England, that why was it that there was such a veneration for a culture that had been traitorous, had been treacherous, and had lost a war? Because there's no other place on earth where you see the kind of equal billing or space given for this within a civil war. I mean, having my ethnic heritage from Pakistan, you don't see memorials to the wars of those who were defeated as a result of their treachery. So it was always very confusing, made more so when it was glorified by the General Lee and Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid. But part of it seems to also be a confusion that America has when it comes to the symbolism of its military. You mentioned NASCAR, and here you see this convergence of Jesus and military flyovers. We can also talk about Colin Kaepernick and this whole idea about the sacrality of the national anthem, because I think it's all then related into what you said when you're talking about the culture wars. We're living at a really interesting moment now, because all of these things are finally being reassessed, reevaluated, and maybe we're going to have that much needed reset button finally pushed.
I think the reset button on the earth has been pushed. Really, I think somebody, whether you believe in God or you know, the karma or whatever, I think somebody said things are too fucked up here. I'm just hitting the reset button, collapse, and we'll rebuild from the bottom.
Well,
This
you might
species
be
is a
more right
parasite.
than you know, Alan, because I was reading an article about how the magnetic poles might be shifting and reversing. So quite literally, the Earth's button is being pushed.
So are we in that equivalent period of time right now when you hit the reset button on your router and you have to wait that 45 seconds for it to actually reconnect you to the internet, where you're just sort of in that panic mode for a little bit and nobody knows what's going on? It's going to last a little longer than 45 seconds, obviously, but it certainly does seem as if we are willing to accept the notion that it might be time to fix some things for the first time in a long time.
But I think, they talk in Zen and Buddhism and all that about the cyclical nature of the world. The world comes together and it falls apart and comes together. And we see it, World War II, then this war, then this recession, then this depression. Things collapse, things come back together. Things are great, things collapse. I mean, things were going relatively well in the economy. The country was not going so well. I think it was so toxic. And I think that, in the world of karma and all that, just sort of undermined and imploded everything. So
Wow, we're all getting metaphysical here. Okay.
yes. Can we chant? Can we
rabbi
start
was-
chanting?
I'm
Great,
all
Rabbi
great
was
song.
scandalized.
Great
Right.
song by Olivia Newton-John. Let's get metaphysical.
There you go. Hey, the world
a
could
beat
use a
time.
little Olivia Newton-John right now. We saw Grease was on TV the other night, so you never know.
Wow.
Well, the
Hey,
fact that the state legislature some time ago, a couple of weeks ago, had to ban displays of the Confederate flag in the Senate chambers, I think sort of speaks volumes about where we are and what we're willing to do. And that was before the protests really erupted. The idea that somehow, and I'm with you, Saeed, the idea that somehow that we would lift up traitors to our republic has been something that, as you folks know, occurred during the Jim Crow era. And those statues were erected after laws were struck down that prohibited displays of the Confederacy. And those statues and the reemergence of the Confederate flag and this revisionist history about why the Civil War occurred happened as a result of, people trying to, put their knee on the necks of Black folks, as it were, through their Jim Crow laws and segregation. And now that folks are recognizing it for what it is, and tearing those statues down. I say tear them all down. I've been looking for a Confederate statue here in Michigan somewhere. I can't find one. But if I get my hands on a flag, it's going up in smoke.
As a native of Columbus, Ohio, though, I would like to say, and I was taught the absolute Disneyfied PG, or not even PG, G-rated version of the Columbus story. I would like to see at least one or two of his statues remain. I mean, we can plaque them up with all kinds of stuff about genocidal, his genocidal takeover of the New World, but at the same time, Columbus. I have a tiny little soft spot in my heart for him.
But it's interesting. We have Henry Ford. I mean, here's a guy who's done tremendous stuff, and the Ford family has done tremendous stuff in this community and building
those good
hospitals.
genes. Don't forget, it's because Ford had good genes.
Yes,
good genes.
Right. On the other hand, it was interesting when Bill McGraw had done a story on the history of Henry Ford and his friendship with Hitler and his anti-Semitism and his anti-Semitic publication. And it's like that, people are torn. Like, the guy's done so much amazing things, and he was friends with Hitler. So, it's hard to wrestle. People wrestle with that. I mean, I don't wrestle with it, but,
And the other thing to keep in mind is it wasn't as though if these people hadn't existed, things wouldn't have gone the way they went. I mean, the old world and the new world were on a collision course at some point. Somebody was going to figure out a way to sail across the ocean, and
somebody had done it a long time before Columbus, but
the Vikings, exactly. But I mean, the fact that we all read Guns, Germs, and Steel. The diseases that came from the New World that had as much of a devastating effect on the native population as any any kind of warfare. I mean, all of these things, a lot of them were sort of inevitable. I mean, it's just the way the world goes. You know, we're not a peaceful people, generally speaking.
Well, you know what? Nancy, I hear what you're saying with the Columbus statues and these symbols that we're all talking about. And if a Columbus statue has to remain, like I can't get my hands on one, I think that the real history needs to be told. And
Yes.
just like the Confederacy statues were erected during Jim Crow, the statues of Christopher Columbus and Columbus Day happened as a result of a massacre of Italians in New Orleans after the Civil War.
Yes.
And that was so bad. That was done by racists who were using the Italians, who they didn't consider white at the time, for cheap labor. And then things got so out of hand that the Italian government demanded reparations for those Italian immigrants who were murdered. And the president and Congress got together and they declared one day as Columbus Day as a way to sort of appease the
That was
Italian
part of the
government.
settlement. We're not going to
Yeah.
give you any
I've
money,
lost everybody.
but we're going to give you a holiday and some statues. You're absolutely
then-
right, Greg.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
absolutely right.
and then from that, Italians were reclassified as Caucasian, so they wouldn't have to suffer that indignity again.
Where I used to live in Indiana, there were restrictive covenants in a subdivision, not the one I lived in, but the one that was like just on the other side of this road, the better part, that specifically prohibited selling the property to Italians. I mean, Italians, Macedonians, Southern Europeans, it said, Mongoloids, which I assume they meant, Asians, people, I mean, who knows, and African Americans. So same thing. Yeah.
Go ahead. Saeed.
A couple years ago, I was in Barcelona and walking through this plaza, and it was fairly early in the morning. And in the middle, there was a kiosk, and there was a big black and white, like blown up photograph from the era of the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. And it was an open air car, and you saw these military officers, and you also saw priests in the same car. And next to it, they had, in 4 different languages, a description. And it was really vivid, especially in Spanish, as well as it was in Catalan and French and English. And it said, look at the buildings around you. If they could speak, they would provide you with the history. And then it goes into a description about the fascists and the Spanish Civil War. And the idea then of perhaps reorganizing these spaces, as Greg said, where you have an explanation and a context to these kinds of monuments. Or what you do is you just completely revamp it, like in South Africa. You change the flag. So that way you are updating things and you no longer have the opportunity to venerate under the name of tradition or some other incompatible justification for a past which was divisive.
Well,
Don't forget the role of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa.
And that, there's been a couple of really good pieces I've read in the last couple of days talking about the similarities between South Africa and what the United States is going through right now. So that should be something to watch out for. And I wouldn't be shocked to see if somebody decides to actually give that a real look, and that sort of methodology on how to deal with the problem could be cathartic. You don't know. But I do want to
have a Mandela, though.
Okay.
Can I say one last thing before we
go
leave
ahead.
Christopher Columbus behind?
Oh, we're not leaving Columbus behind entirely.
Okay, Detroit has a Columbus statue. They don't have it's not a full form. It's a bust at Randolph and Jefferson.
Yes, it is right there. You're right. It is right there.
And I'm kind of surprised that nobody has
Now that you put it out there.
People have protested in front of that before in past rallies that have been going on.
I think Greg will be out there later today.
It's coming down, baby.
Well, I just want to get to something that Saeed was saying that's somewhat timely when he's talking about presenting these things with context and history. HBO Max makes the decision this week to take Gone with the Wind down for a little bit. We're talking about culture wars here. And so they're going to present it with some context about how this film was made, when it was made, why it's important from a film perspective, but also to talk about some of the stereotypes that exist in that film. the backlash for this was just ridiculous to me. A bunch of people saying, how dare they take down Gone with the Wind? And then we had another group of people suggesting that, the same thing happened to Song of the South. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding? And then another person comes in and says, well, if they can't show Gone with the Wind, they can't show Blazing Saddles either. To which I responded, you clearly don't understand the message of Blazing Saddles in any way, shape, or form.
Because of the use of the N-word?
Well, it just because well, they're saying that you couldn't make that movie today. I'm like, well, it needed to be made at the time it was made, and it still stands up because the message that it was is that racists are stupid, is basically what that whole movie is all about.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the comedy.
Yeah, well, but if you think about it, I mean, the fact that we are willing to get triggered by the fact that Gone with the Wind might be presented in some sort of historical context rather than just, this sort of, Pollyannish vision of the antebellum South, it just shows how far we have to go. I mean, and the fact that we get stuck on these stupid things over and over again is just incredibly frustrating.
I do worry. I do worry a little bit about. I mean, I'm all for political correctness, and to a certain degree, but it's like just take it a little bit a shift here. The New York Times thing, and I don't know about Senator Cotton's story. I feel I find that really bothersome that the guy James Bennett, who used to be the bureau chief here of the New York Times, who I was a freelance for when I was on strike, who seemed like a very decent guy to me. He got fired. The staff, and I find it. I mean, I don't agree with Senator Cotton what he said at all, and I don't agree. I'm sure I don't agree with many things that he stands for, but. The idea of opening up, I don't agree with every column that goes into Deadline Detroit. I don't agree with every point. I know we've talked about different things. I find it a little bit worrisome that mentality of we don't like this point of view, even though I don't like the point of view at all, but I do appreciate that the New York Times is trying to, it was like a friend of mine wrote a column about this and said William Safire, when A.M. Rosenthal hired William Safire, who was Nixon's speechwriter, the staff went crazy. They were like, "This is horrible," and he ended up being one of their best columnists.
But Lingo, how do you address the issue of having a false equivalency? I mean, every point of view is not necessarily one that is equally valid as
right.
We like to say, because there's some kooks out there, man, with some crazy stuff.
But he's a U.S. I mean, he's a U.S. senator. He represents the Trump administration's mindset there, and he was writing it. I think it gives. I mean, if there's a factual error in there, they should challenge him and say, "You need to correct this before we run it." But the fact that the staff could go up in arms and say, "We hate the idea of you running this point of view," it's not. It's not like, even though it's not the KKK saying we need to kill Jews and blacks and stuff like that. I mean, it was a point of view that is the president is speaking of, and none of us have to agree with it, but I think it's a dangerous precedent what's going on in that respect. I found it.
I guess I can respect that. But at the same time, I can't because because Alan, we don't want somebody,
Alan, you're full of it.
writing a column in the New York Times that the Holocaust didn't happen, or millions of people did not perish during slavery. That this is writing those kind of fantasies out there. I mean,
I agree with that. There should be limits. There should be limits to it. But if somebody says, "I believe we should use the military for that," which is insane, but look, the president is advocating, and there are other people advocating it who are in important positions here.
He's a U.S. senator.
And he's a U.S. senator, so I just think that.
I mean, he's not some crank off the street.
I just think it's dangerous when
actually,
staff, look.
He is a crank off the street. Okay.
Yeah, I think
plenty of those in politics.
New York Times has done some stuff. They're certainly not perfect, and they've run some stuff. They've run cartoons or whatever sometimes that they shouldn't have run. But I felt like in this instance, and then the new person who took over put a note out to the staff, or was quoted in a story or something, as saying, "Please let me know if you're ever uncomfortable with everything immediately." And
you know what I'm reminded of when these things happen? in
What?
these little kerfuffles in journalism. The old saying, a doctor buries his mistakes, a lawyer's go to jail, but a journalist's mistakes are like put on the front page and amplified and discussed. It's like it's a miracle anybody goes into journalism at all. But anyway.
Well, okay.
Or becomes president.
We
Yeah.
need to
As
move
my
on to a
dog
couple
would
of
say,
things.
that point of view is dog poop. It was dog poop.
All right, we got to move on to a couple of things. First of all, and this is getting back to the story of race in this country. President Trump getting ready to restart his rallies. We'll talk about the fact that he's making people sign a coronavirus waiver in just a minute. But the fact that he's having it in Tulsa, which is a site of one of the most notorious racial incidents in the United States history, on Juneteenth. It almost seems intentional that he is trying to rile people up with the date on this one. And I want to lump this one.
Almost, you say?
I'm trying to be somewhat fair here, but it's difficult.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I want to rope into this is that the president apparently is working on some sort of speech about race relations in this country. And word is that Stephen Miller is actually the one who is working on this for him. And I can't think of anybody that could fan the flames of this any more than Stephen Miller and his toxic, noxious views on what America is supposed to be. This is not going to go the way that the president hopes. There is no way it can.
It's going to be a flaming shit show of major proportions. I mean, it's because Stephen Miller will write the text, which is one thing, and then he's going to go off script because he always goes off script. He's going to start ad-libbing. It's going to be a meltdown. It's going to be fun. This is
the one time that I really hope Melania plagiarizes from the Obamas and gives her work of the speech.
Well, we're going to get to Melania in a little bit. Some stuff breaking this morning. A new book coming out about her called The Art of Her Deal. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But I do want to talk a little bit about this rally. This is a guy who said that, the coronavirus is not a big deal. He called it a hoax originally, but the lawyers are smarter. If you attend this rally in Tulsa, you have to sign a waiver that says you will not sue either the venue or the Trump administration or the Trump campaign if you catch coronavirus at this event. So if their lawyers are worried about people spreading coronavirus at this event and worried about the legal liability, maybe, just maybe, they know more than they're letting on about the coronavirus and the danger. We're seeing a second spike in this because of this lax attitude we're seeing around the country. And if anybody goes to that rally and willingly signs that waiver, well, have fun. I really hope you have a great time at this rally. But if you're stupid enough to sign away your legal rights because you're stupid enough to go to this rally in the first place, I don't know what to tell you. But the fact that they're asking you to sign
I think I'll be shocked
about the coronavirus and whether it's real or not.
I'll be shocked if anyone in the rally is wearing a mask, because I think it would be sort of you're a liberal, you're a libtard, you believe in. I can't imagine there would be such shaming at a rally if anyone was wearing a mask.
It's just a bad flu.
Yeah.
Well,
off work,
it'll go away. We got 15 cases. Next week it'll be 5, and then it'll disappear. It'll be April.
It's hot weather, so Oklahoma is going to be really hot. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's probably a non-disclosure clause that even if you get COVID, you're not allowed to disclose that you've got COVID.
You're probably right about that. But somebody said that, I think it was Trump's press secretary or somebody, who said he had no idea about the significance of Juneteenth and Tulsa, Oklahoma, celebrating the 99th year of the massacre.
I believe that. I believe it. He didn't understand the significance of Pearl Harbor when he was there. He's like telling somebody, he goes, "Tell me again, what's the big deal here?
What's the name of the boat that we're looking at in the bottom of Pearl Harbor?"
But those sycophants around him, certainly do understand the meaning of having it in Tulsa, and particularly on June 19th, during the 99th year anniversary of the massacre there. And I think that part of the reason they're doing it is what we've seen from these guys all along: gaslighting. It's like, how can we give the finger to all the, as Lingo just put it, political correctness that exists out there? Well, let's go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is the 99th anniversary of people being massacred there, Black folks, and we'll do it on Juneteenth. Yes, and since we're the party of Lincoln, that was the statement that they said. Who better than to recognize Juneteenth than the folks who are the party of Lincoln. You know what I mean?
They are so far away from being able to claim that mantle right now, and
Oh, absolutely.
it's
And I
despicable.
think
Never
that,
stop.
oh, they never
But
stop. So, but I think that's part of the gaslighting, and it does send a message to the nationalists, the white nationalists out there. Is like, look, we're still with you. Now, if Trump gets up there and during this, they have a celebration, a Juneteenth celebration, I would fall out of my chair in terms of have somebody read the Emancipation Proclamation to say, you know, what Juneteenth is all about, to have, you know, a black celebration, as it were, of freedom, you know. But instead, I don't think we're going to see that at all. I suspect that what we're going to see are a bunch of Confederate flags.
I wouldn't be shocked.
You know,
I wouldn't be shocked at all. And again, it is a middle finger to all the political correctness. I think Greg is spot on with that point, but we've been seeing it time and time again. Just, you know, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say, you know, it's interesting, the term political correctness, I mean, took on a different connotation, I think, when Trump got elected, because I think a lot of people were just like, yes, we're tired of that political correctness. For them, it meant, yes, we should be able to use the N-word, and we should be able to say the most racist, hateful things, and without feeling guilty or bad. I think that's the difference. He unmasked or unleashed whatever, a whole different attitude about political correctness, and it meant anything that you couldn't say that was racist. They were like, oh my God, I should be able to say whatever I want. And so,
and sexist too. Let's not forget that.
yes.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a given. Well, you know, I do want to talk about some of the news of the week too. I mean, some of the things that we're seeing around the country as a result of the protests that have been taking place. 2 TV shows have been removed. Cops is no longer going to be, after 30-something seasons. Cops is gone, and Live PD is gone after it turned out that they destroyed footage that actually showed a person being killed by the police. That show is not going to be on the air any longer. And I guess I don't have a problem with these shows going away, because what I think they did was really sort of fan the flames that everybody out there is potentially harmful to you, and it's only these police that are saving you, despite the fact that the police got to approve every piece of footage that went out, so you could never see them acting badly. But what you realize when you watch that show is occasionally they come across somebody who's dangerous, but the vast majority of people who are on that show are people having a crappy day who just happen to find themselves interacting with the police for something minor, whether they are arguing with their girlfriend or spouse, and they're walking down the street away, and the cops come, and then they harass him, find a joint on the guy. He goes in the back of the car. He's now in the criminal justice system. It shows just how, you know, petty and minor some of this stuff is.
They used to bust, they'd make a big deal. They'd find a little bit of weed in the car and go, oh my God, we've got to take a look over here. And you know, the thing that scared me about those shows is that the behavior of the officers that were being filmed, I was like, oh my gosh, they're being filmed and they're acting this way. They're really acting borderline abusive.
I have 2 things to say about this. The worst thing about it for me was not the behavior of the cops. It was the fact that some of these people signed a release. Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah, I want to be on TV.
But there's what I just said. They didn't want to. Some of them said they would get charges reduced against them if they signed. I mean, some of these people were coerced into signing by the police.
Yes, exactly, or hoodwinked.
That's criminal.
I want to recommend a podcast. I'm sorry, I know this is your podcast.
That's fine. There's more than one.
It's called Running from Cops. It's by Dan Taberski, who did the Richard Simmons, I don't know, Chasing Richard Simmons or something. A lot of people had a problem with that, but it's a really good podcast, about 8 episodes, and it dives really deep into the cops culture and the cops phenomenon and what goes on cops. And it's, my daughter, when my daughter was in middle school, we used to watch it on Saturday nights together as a family and just laugh at it. And I recommended to her. She loved it. We both loved it. Running from Cops. So,
well, let me say this about the cops thing. You know, reality TV shows do have a penchant, right, for not being reality. Thank you, Nancy. And people tend to perform for them. And you folks might remember that here in Detroit, back in the day when Warren Evans was the chief of police, and the cop show came here. And they followed Detroit cops on a raid, and one of them ended up shooting that young girl.
Yep.
That wasn't That was a different one. That wasn't Cops. That was a different one.
It was a different cop show, but it was
the cop show.
right at the corner of St. Jean and Mac over in that area.
Yeah.
Right. Are you sure it wasn't Cops? I thought it was
No,
Cops.
it was. I think it was called something like the First 48 or
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was
Apologies
a
to
CBS,
Cops,
the
but
CBS show.
Yeah.
another doom show. But
Yeah.
but in either case, you know, to your point, Alan, of how people perform, how cops would go get extra because they were being filmed, it's true. Just like parking wars, you know, those folks would go be extra on writing the tickets. Everybody's performing for the camera, and so it's I think it's well past due, well past time for those shows to disappear. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty surprised, and I don't know if anybody's an attorney here, that those shows have not been sued in relationship to some of the egregious behavior that has occurred as a result of, you know, those cameras being there.
Well, and like I said, it's about time that we sort of revisit our fascination with these things, because again, it really does expose just how ordinary people who make one bad decision or just have a bad day can all of a sudden find themselves caught up in the system that can lead to awful events. And it's just, I'm not sad to see them go, because I think the job of a police officer, it's a difficult job. I get that. But at the same time, they can choose not to have these interactions sometimes, but they choose to do it anyway. And like I said, there's some great essays that I've been reading. One in Medium that I just read this morning from a former police officer talking about the stuff that they would do, finding weird loopholes to get people in trouble for, just because they needed to meet their quota and they wanted to do it. And so not necessarily planting evidence or things like that, but finding really obscure statutes, like this homeless guy is sleeping too close to a train track. He's violating some old railroad statute, so we can go harass the homeless people.
Right.
You know, just stuff like that needs to be brought to light, and people need to see what's going on there. All right.
For a long time, we've been very schizophrenic with law enforcement about what we want from them. You know, we want them to catch the terrorists. We want them to write parking tickets. We want them to, you know, handle domestic violence. I mean, the things that we've asked from law enforcement it's just too much, man. It's too much.
Yeah.
And I think we really need to refocus.
A 20-year-old kid should not be a domestic violence counselor.
Exactly.
You know, it's true. All right. So we do have to move on to some other things. Nancy, I wanted to bring you in on this one because I thought you'd appreciate this. Now, reporting out today that there's a new book about Melania Trump coming out called The Art of Her Deal. Now, you have always talked about her being, one of your favorite people to discuss. Now, have you heard what's going on with this, what they're suggesting? Remember,
I read that story.
The White House right away.
Yeah, I read that story, and you
leverage to get a better prenup.
You have taken my Schmuck of the Week nomination out of my mouth.
We're running out of time anyway.
I know we are.
Might as well go to Schmuck of the Week. So if that's yours, go for it.
Well, I just want to make one quick statement about it. Over the last few years, I have really changed my thinking about what we now call sex work, you know, prostitution. I now accept that even though trafficking occurs and even though there's, you know, it can be a very grim business, it is a defensible business if a woman goes into it with her eyes open and, you know, et cetera. So I believe that sex work is work, but one reason I really dislike Melania is that every time I think about her or see her, I find the word whore bubbling to my lips. And when I read that story today, it did so again. So
if my mother around, she would have said, "She looks like a hooker."
And the fact that people lionize her over Michelle Obama is all the proof of racism, of a racist culture that you need, even if there wasn't already an abundance of proof.
I love during the GOP, during the convention in 2016, where she got up there, you know, and it was, you know, Trump, so all American, anti, you know, foreign. And then she got up and said, "Donald Trump, very great man." And it looked almost like, you look at all the people in the audience, they looked almost horrified, like, oh my God, there's a Rusky going to be in the White House.
Let's hear from the smart guy in the middle there. He never talks. He hasn't said much in the last
Well, he's not in the middle of my screen, but Saeed, go ahead.
I was just that Nikolai Volkov impersonation just had me in stitches there, Alan. So, it's remarkable how we've kind of descended into this situation, and it's going to be a competition to see who buys more copies of the book. Is it going to be Melania Trump's book, or is it going to be John Bolton's memoirs?
If they get published.
Dropped. Yeah, but I mean, I think we're seeing the subtle hints that are already starting to leak out from that. I thought one of the best things that I've read was where it called Donald Trump the last Confederate president.
I saw that this morning.
And maybe that is the kind of cautious optimism that we have, that we can put to bed this entire glorification of this part of American history.
I was on a DDOT bus. It was during the actual impeachment proceedings, and I was watching the proceeding on my phone while I'm riding on the bus. And I I started talking to a guy, and he's like, "I don't know, man." He goes, "I kind of, he goes, Donald Trump's been kind of good for me," and so I said some negative things, and he said, "I don't know, he speaks his mind." He says, "You know what? He's our first ghetto president," and I think he was saying that in that he likes, he just speaks his mind, and he, I was kind of surprised. But I was like,
that was Bill Clinton.
No,
yeah, well,
the
Bill
first
Clinton
black president.
he's our first black president. But
Okay.
Which, anyway,
right.
I don't think anybody would get away with that now.
No.
All right, so Greg, who's your schmuck of the week? Who do you got?
My schmuck of the week is Warren Police Chief Dyer. That's his name. Did I say that right?
Okay.
Bill Dyer.
Here's a guy, Bill Dyer. Here's a guy
Dyer.
who's been around forever and a day, right? And here at the height of protesting for Black Lives Matter, people talking about defunding police departments and their interactions with police officers, he steps out there and charges an Amazon truck driver with felonies. Felonies.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we can all see on the camera who's committing a felony. And it ain't that guy being thrown to the ground and handcuffed because he parked on the wrong side of the street in a FedEx truck.
While working for the post office, by the way, because the post office, and they're allowed to pull on that side of the road. But that is, it was a ridiculous scene. And the fact that the cop was just so brain dead to think that this was acceptable behavior at that point in time just tells me we got a lot of work to do.
Exactly. But then the chief forwards felony charges to the Macomb County prosecutor, who declined it.
Yes.
Because it was a lot of BS. And so the idea, I mean, come on, Warren Mayor Fawkes, you need to get rid of Dyer. Just fire that guy. I mean, the mayor was on point from the beginning when he said, this is unacceptable, fire that cop. But what does his chief do? His chief gets in the mayor's face and tells him, take down your post, you don't know what you're talking about, and then sends these phony baloney charges over to the prosecutor, who then boots him. So, that's my schmuck of the week. Bill Dyer.
Life is different in Macomb County, Greg.
All right, Saeed, who is your schmuck of the week?
My schmuck of the week is, and this is probably going to be the most publicity he gets moving forward, is Ray Ciccarelli, who is a little to not at all known NASCAR driver who apparently never finished better than, I think, one top 10 finish in 18 races, has decided now to be the bearer of the First Amendment in championing the Confederate flag to be allowed to be flown at NASCAR events, despite the fact that NASCAR has banned them from all races and from all other performances regarding it. He himself claims that he's not really for the flag, but he believes in people's rights to come here and display all that they have. It's great to see that NASCAR actually clapped back after he tweeted out that he's quitting the whole shindig by saying, we literally had to Google you to figure out that.
That was an amazing response.
Great response. So I think again to go ahead and echo the oracle of NASCAR, Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you are last.
All right, Alan, schmuck of the week.
I have the schmuck of the week. I for me is state senator from Ohio, Steve Huffman, who said that people of color, or you say colored
No,
people.
he said colored people.
Colored people are to blame for the coronavirus because they haven't been washing their hands. So, you know, and it's interesting.
Greg, you haven't seen this, Greg? Yeah, you'll love this.
And it goes, and just even expand a little bit, in Europe and around the world, there was some poll which was fairly high amount of people said that the Jews were responsible for it. So it's interesting how people blame, particularly, I always find it fascinating on Facebook. You'll see all these people blaming everything but Trump. They'll say, what about Hillary Clinton? And you'll be like, well, Hillary's not around anymore. But they'll, it's just amazing.
What we're going to find out is that the email server was actually a clandestine virus maker that was put in Ukraine and unleashed upon the world through China to make China look bad.
Right.
And they're making the vaccine in the basement of Comet Ping Pong.
Well, the follow-up.
I live 2 blocks from there.
Is that he was fired from his emergency medicine job at a hospital because he's actually a physician.
Yes.
Representative Huffman. But, on the point about, as Alan said, about blaming everybody else, there was a tweet from somebody who's, of course, really upset that people are taking down statues. And they said, yeah, well, if we're going to be taking down all these statues, maybe we need to go ahead and take some statues down of Muhammad. I'm like, good luck finding one.
That's pretty good. I like that a lot. Okay, I've got a schmuck of the week, and this is a person who's been the schmuck of the week before, or at least been nominated, because like most of these guys, we share the award every week, the Donald J. Trump Schmuck of the Week Award. Remember, the J stands for genius. My nominee is Tucker Carlson, Fox commentator, for doing a couple of things, saying some really horrific things about Black Lives Matter protesters out there, and also deciding that he needed to go after Elmo this week because Sesame Street dared actually have a show for kids explaining to them what is going on in America right now in a way that kids can understand. Nancy, you wanted to jump in?
Oh, no. I was just, I have a dog over here that's like.
Got it. Well, so Tucker Carlson goes after Elmo, and anytime you attack Sesame Street, I can't say anything about that. That's just dumb. I saw the very first episode of Sesame Street when it aired back in 1969, and it holds an important place in my heart. And Elmo is about as big a threat to the Republic as Elmo, I guess. I don't know.
How the propaganda starts. This is how the propaganda starts.
Well, it's
brainwashing children.
Next thing you know, that kid's going to want to go to college.
Michael and I, during the winter, and we haven't finished the project for obvious reasons now, but we were interviewing children, asking about Trump. And we had a guy at the ice rink who got in my face. He was with his teenage son, and he was so angry. Why are we talking to these children, asking their opinions? They can't vote. And I said, who cares? They're human beings. It's their president too. It doesn't matter. They have an opinion. And a lot of kids did have an opinion, but this guy was so angry, saying it's none of their business.
Well, I got to finish up my thing. Tucker Carlson, as a result of his very erratic week on television, is losing sponsors left and right, including the Papa John's franchise.
Ooh.
And I said, if you lose Papa John's, it's just a matter of time before the My Pillow dude decides to bail on him too. And there's, and once you lose that guy, you're pretty much left with the people who have the, the bunker food sellers and the people who are trying to shield gold. That's all that's going to be left for your show pretty soon, the survivalist type. So Tucker, be careful out there, man. Maybe you're going to have to live on that family fortune that you inherited instead of your television revenue, because it's drying up pretty fast. Shut the hell up about things you don't understand, unless you really have a great point to make. But these points are not good. When you get Papa John's bolting on you, you've got real problems.
Yeah. Losing Papa John's is the equivalent of Trump losing Mississippi.
Yeah. Or
That's
NASCAR.
pretty accurate.
Yeah,
all right.
NASCAR
Well, okay. So here's the deal. We are wrapping up this week. Things are starting to open up here in Michigan. Governor Whitmer withstood a lot of criticism. Our state's numbers look like they're going in the right direction when it comes to COVID. places are opening up. Anybody planning on rushing out anywhere anytime soon?
No.
I don't know. It's a little scary still. Michael was out there yesterday taking, was it yesterday or the day before, taking photographs. He was going through Royal Oak, and one of the bars would not let him take pictures because people were just hanging out together and not really separating. I was driving down Woodward last night. I was driving through Ferndale at 9.5 of Woodward. There's people at Como's at 9 of Woodward waiting to get on the deck. They're all crowded together, and it scares me to see what's going on.
Well, but here's the thing, I mean, one really important thing for Southeast Michigan that is now going to happen is Jobby Nooner. Now everybody knows Jobby Nooner, of course, out in Lake St. Clair. Nancy, of course, went out there last year with Michael Lucido, as a matter of fact, to check it out. Nancy, are you going to Jobby Nooner?
I'm going to make myself a bikini out of N95 masks. And I've got one on each boob and like one down on the business. And I don't know what I'm going to do in the back. And, yeah.
You'd be in every newspaper out there if you did that. You would make national news if you did that.
That'd go viral for us.
You're going to have an N95. You're going to have an N95 on every place except your face.
You don't put it on your face. Haven't you heard? It's a hoax. It's just a bad flu. So.
You white people who think you're immune from the coronavirus are gonna get it, man. You guys need to it's not just a black disease. You guys are gonna get your lesson. I'm telling you.
Well, that's just going to be a mess as usual. Saeed, I know you'll be out there because that's your event of the year, right?
Do I need a
boat?
boat?
Lake St. Clair. I'll give you some coordinates, and you point your boat out there and follow the drunk people.
Do you think that is it going to turn into? Are they going to be part of the Trump flotilla that's supposed to be coming down the Detroit River?
I heard about that.
Yeah,
that's tomorrow. I believe it's Saturday. They're going to have that out.
Yeah, it is tomorrow. It's Saturday.
Totally awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, have fun at that. Anybody that's going to go out there to that one, but be careful, everybody. Social distancing still matters. And if you want any proof of that, look what's going on in Texas. Look what's going on in Florida. Look what's going on in Arizona. Look what's going on in California. We are seeing spikes in places that opened up too early. It is still out there, and it is still taking people's lives. Even if the numbers seem smaller, that's still somebody that passed away from this disease. And you can do something to actually not enable it to spread any further. Just be smart. Don't be stupid. Take it easy out there and just take it slow. It's going to be all right. I mean, you know what? That beer, you can still buy it at the store and have it at home if you want to. You can still take out your boat and not crowd around tens of thousands of other people. I understand the need that some people have to see somebody potentially flash them, but as somebody who has actually seen a naked woman in my life, it's not that important that it happened tomorrow. So,
wow.
Think
Says
about
you
that for just a second. Yeah, not that necessary.
People have been on lockdown for 3 months, man. What are you talking about?
The internet has all sorts of things to entertain people, Greg. You know this.
That's true. That's true. Not that Jobby Nooner is also been known as the most germ-free environment anyway. You know?
I've never been. Nancy did go last year, and she said it was kind of fun, but it was also cold last year, and the rain cut it short. So.
It was. And the water was very cold. And the water's going to be deeper this year. So it's going to be, people will be wading. I mean, last year we were wading up to like our chest. This year it'll probably be up to our necks. So it will look like some kind of weird, disembodied, collection of heads. It's going to be quite something. So.
Is there herd immunity there?
Yeah, herd immunity.
Or is it herd immunity, or is it thinning the herd potentially that's going to come out of this? I'm not sure, but all right, guys, we've got to wrap it up. I certainly appreciate everybody being here. Saeed, nice to have you back, my friend. Thank you very much. And one of these days, you and I might actually get to see some live music again soon. That would be something that I do miss. That's something that I do want to see again. That'll be happening soon. Greg Bowens, we always appreciate you being back. Thank you, sir. Alan, Nancy, same time next week. We appreciate it very much. And hopefully things calm down just a little bit. And thanks to Michael Lucy. Oh, go ahead, Nance.
Maybe I'll have electricity by then.
Well, that's true. Wow. And good luck with that one.
I looked it up. You're not going to have electricity. It says till like Saturday at 12 a.m. or something.
They keep. Because
I was trying to figure out, do I need to get up early this morning to do the page? So I had to look up your electrical.
Anyway, let's get
this.
Hey,
can I say congratulations to the Cass Tech graduates who picked up their cap and gowns today. You know, they got these cool T-shirts that say, "Born around 9/11, unbreakable, graduated during a pandemic, undefeatable." Hashtag.
Undefinable.
All right. And also,
Wow.
Greg, real quick, you invited me to something that I thought was kind of interesting the other day. There's going to be some online town hall meetings that the
Yes.
Harper Woods Grosse Pointe chapter of the NAACP is hosting. I think people who want to learn a little something maybe should tune in. What's going on with those?
Well, it's a several week course where we will dialogue together about race, racial issues, racial reconciliation, and anti-racism. How to be an anti-racist. And I think that would be really cool. So I had invited you not because I thought that you needed it, but I thought that you may be able to contribute to the dialogue in some.
Well, we can learn something all the time. And if you ever stop learning something, that's when your life is officially over, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I'll be there and looking forward to some of those. That should be great.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering the broadcast once again today. Thanks to Samaritas for sponsoring the program and Deadline Detroit. A reminder, if you caught us late or you missed some of this, it'll be available as a podcast later today at deadlinedetroit.com. You can find it pretty easily. Just click on my name on the top of the page. It'll take you there. The video will be up on deadlinedetroit.com tomorrow as well and available on Deadline's YouTube page too. And so we try to make it available for you as many ways as we can. Thanks to everybody for watching today. And Alan?
Hey, stay home safely.
My name's ML Elric. I'm an investigative reporter and a connoisseur of fine yogurts. I know a little bit about Detroit. I know a little bit about deadlines. And I'm asking you to become a member of DeadlineDetroit.com. Like me, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm making a monthly donation. My wife is making a monthly donation. I know that seems redundant, but they need the money, and the money goes to a good place. Getting the story out, getting the truth out. Because if we don't support local journalism, there's some people a couple blocks away from here who are going to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to cost you a whole lot more than just a few bucks out of your pocket every month. Go to DeadlineDetroit.com, become a member. You'll see it's really easy at the top of the website. Give early, give often, give generously. Just give a damn. That's the best way I know how.
Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.